The World Trade Organization says global goods trade is on track for recovery despite lingering risks. 2024 global trade in goods is expected to see a 2.7% rise on the previous year. That's slightly higher than the previous estimate of 2.6%. Now, the rebound comes after a 1.1% slump last year due to high inflation and interest rates. The recovery trend is likely to continue in 2025, with the volume of world merchandise trade projected to rise by 3%. Well, despite that growth, the World Trade Organization warns that rising geopolitical tensions and increased economic policy uncertainty continue to pose risks to their forecast. Ralph Ossa is Chief Economist at the World Trade Organization. Good to see you. Welcome to the program. Well, let's look into our crystal ball. Wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, geopolitical tension ongoing, trade wars, US elections. I mean, does your forecast survive all of that? You're being rather optimistic, aren't you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I mean, the main message from what we see in the data looking backwards, but also what we anticipate going forwards, is that trade is resilient and has been resilient. And you mentioned the headline figures already. But at the same time, we do also see risks, and we do also see that the risks are firmly tilted to the downside, and the geopolitical risks that you mentioned, but also the trade policy uncertainty that you mentioned, are very high on our minds.
Let's just focus in on one part of the world. What about the picture in Asia? Because there has been a substantial shift, hasn't there, in supply chains, particularly there?
Well, there's a number of interesting changes. So the headline numbers haven't changed very much, but Asia has outperformed our expectations, particularly on the export side. Europe has underperformed our expectations, both on the import and export side. And what you see is you see that as a result of the trade tensions between the United States and China, some of the trade appears to find a different route. So, for example, we see that trade between China and Vietnam is going up, and trade between Vietnam and the United States is going up. So one plausible interpretation is that these countries become something like connector countries.
You'll forgive a business program with being obsessed nightly with inflation and interest rates. In your judgment, do you think we're out of the woods when it comes to this period of high inflation and high interest rates?
So we don't have a forecast on inflation, but I can tell you what inflation did and our assessment is going to do to international trade. Last year, you already mentioned, we saw a contraction in the volume of world merchandise trade, and we very much link that to high inflation, because if prices are high, real incomes are low, consumers don't buy, consumer durables, don't buy a new fridge, firms don't invest, and these are exactly the goods that are disproportionately traded. So the slowdown last year was very much due to inflation, but the recovery that we are anticipating, that we're predicting, is also due to our expectation that things are at least normalizing on the inflation front and also the monetary policy front.
We've been reporting on the trade dispute between China and the EU when it comes to tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. In your judgment, where does this get resolved? How does it get resolved?
So the important thing to know about the trade conflict between Europe and China, I suppose you refer to the one on electric vehicles, is that it is actually taking place within the framework of the WTO. So there's nothing unusual about such trade tensions between countries. I think for us, what's really key is that the integrity of the rules-based trading system gets maintained, and as a result, also trade policy uncertainty remains low, because that's really what also drives trade flows, right? It's not just about low tariffs, but it's also about the predictability of tariffs, and that's why we need the rules that we have.
Ralph Ossa, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the program. Ralph Ossa, Chief Economist at the World Trade Organization.
Thank you for having me.